Good evening, Catherine, Dr. D, and any other 507 classmates. My name is Tabitha Smith, and I am here with my lived curriculum snapshot number 1. In thinking about our readings, our text, both of our course text and the article, The 4 R's, an alternative to the Tyler rationale, and how I can connect the theoretical to the practical as far as an experience that I've had in my education, as well as what I'm seeing currently or in the most recent past as an administrator now and a former curriculum specialist. I was reading first and foremost in Chapter 4, Cultures of Curriculum, and on pages 60 and 61, when it talked about obstacles to reculturing, one of the topics that caught my attention was actually on page 61, where it discussed that new teachers, in particular, who are trying to establish routines with their students, having them to behave in an orderly way while learning the subject matter that that teacher themselves is not that familiar with, that teacher sometimes is driven, as stated in this text, to revert back to practices in which they experienced in their schooling, elementary education, their middle school education, their high school education, thinking back to what they saw their own teachers doing, and they start to do those same things just for survival. And in this text, it refers to it as the folklore, the occupational gimmicks, the norms, and the daily teaching that reinforce the existing approaches rather than nourish skepticism about reculturing the curriculum. So in there, I began to think about, that's exactly right. In my experiences in my elementary, middle, and high school, lots of those experiences entailed procedural knowledge rather than conceptual knowledge. I didn't realize at the time that I was missing out on the conceptual knowledge because I didn't even know what that was. I just was being exposed to formulas and steps and processes, and luckily I could remember those and I could be successful. I could study facts and recall those facts and make good grades. Through my own teaching experiences, and let me back up, going to the university for my undergraduate study, in one of the methods classes for math, I remember the professor wanting all of us to do something on the abacus. I think that's how you say it. And it was so abstract for me as an adult. I knew exactly what the answer to the problem was that we were working on, but having to show it on that abacus, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly, I remember it being a struggle. Then, as a beginning teacher, and you get professional development and you have leadership opportunities, and as I transformed or changed over into the curriculum specialist role and I began to get more professional development, specifically a series of PD sessions that I was involved in last year called Math Foundations. I think it's called something more specific than that, but that's what it boils down to through DPI. There was a focus on conceptual rather than procedural, and the school in which I was the curriculum specialist received a grant for all 3rd through 8th grade teachers to have this training. And you could see the struggles in the classroom, in the professional development session of the teachers who just used procedural knowledge in the classroom rather than the conceptual knowledge, and for them to have to backtrack to think about concepts rather than procedures was tricky. So then when I started reading the 4 R's, an alternative to the Tyler rationale, on page 254, and as I mentioned in my introductory video, I'm one who reads and I annotate out in the margins and highlight, and I write thoughts and reactions and all sorts of things. In this paragraph where it talks about allowing institution and estimation to come into play, and structural and situational thinking, talking about subtracting from the left rather than the right, and how that was discouraged, but in a sense that was chaotic ordering in which really required higher levels of critical thinking. And out to the side I wrote Common Core, conceptual rather than procedural. Common Core has been controversial for many reasons, and as with all curriculums and programs and frameworks and philosophies, there are going to be pros and cons and positives and negatives, and some people are going to be satisfied and some are not. Many people struggle, I think, with Common Core, and I'm not saying that I think everything about the Common Core is exactly what it needs to be, but I think one of the reasons people struggle with that is because it does focus on the conceptual rather than the procedural. And many of us parents were, I don't want to say victims of, but we did experience the era of procedural rather than conceptual, which is, I think, why there's been such controversy. So in my role as a curriculum specialist, I really tried to emphasize quality over quantity, and then conceptual over procedural. Those two things are going to help us reach end goals that unfortunately have been set for us through standardized testing, which is another whole topic that we read about in our course text, but something that we have to do in public education. So as an administrator as well, doing evaluations and meeting with teachers, I still advocate for conceptual and inquiry, discovery learning, problem-based, project-based, and when we are thinking about our accountability measures that are in place that we have no control over, yes, we have to be strategic, but we can also frame it or reference it or disseminate it in a way that will help our students to develop the foundational learning that they need. I hope that this gives you a little insight into one of my past lived curriculum experiences. Until next time, have a good evening.